What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Brazos Sports PrepsCast. I'm Alex Miller, joined by Abigail Ochoa. It's week 2 of the Texas high school football season. Abigail, we made it through week 1. It was a little crazy
Yeah.
last week. What are some initial thoughts on the first week of the season?
Um, I mean, it's definitely a week one. I think you can tell that these guys are really excited to be back. I mean, there were some games that were just complete blowouts. Um, Kids ready to score and get in the end zone, but then you had some upsets, some good things. Some good things happened. Some teams that weren't expecting to maybe win or maybe even lose, and then of course, sadly, we did have injuries. Key injuries this week. Which we'll talk about a little bit later, but definitely a jam-packed week one. I got to go on the road 2 times last week, and it's already week one, so it's pretty exciting. But yeah, a lot of stuff happened.
Well, let's jump right into the action. And yeah, Abigail, you really put in the miles last week,
Yeah.
getting that mileage expense. Let's start with College Station. That was the first game of the season. Cougars just cruised past Hutto. We kind of expected they would win, maybe win a little big. But what'd
Sure.
you see from the Cougars in that first game?
Yeah, I think we obviously expected they kind of blew out Hutto whenever Hutto was here last year. I think they expected the same thing. Even though Hutto did return a lot of good guys, and I thought they may give them some fight there, but I think the biggest thing that we saw, Steve Huff mentioned before the game that he was going to really be looking to special teams to really figure themselves out and really make a difference and an impact. And I think that was the biggest thing that I took away from watching that game. I mean, Mason Cashin with the 38-yard kickoff return, in the opening kickoff, and then you get Traylon Sewell to go 81 yards on a punt return, I believe. And they always had College Station either starting in Hutto territory or pretty dang close to Hutto territory. So I think that was a big thing. That was the reason for the 59-11 score. College Station was in Hutto territory. They didn't have to take it down that far, and we know what Jet Huff and his receivers can do. We know what Traylon Sewell and Marquise Collins can do on the ground. So it didn't take long for those scores to come up. But I think that was the biggest thing, was seeing special teams, and then obviously their defense stepped up. I mean, we've been talking about their defense all year pretty much, and we really saw it on Thursday. Sorry, I almost said Friday. We saw it last Thursday, but they didn't let Hutto get past the 50-yard line at all in the first half. I think Hutto only had about 4 first downs in the first half. So I mean, a big night for defense, but I think special teams really took the cake there.
Yeah, Cougars, as we said, they cruised past Hutto. The other game you went and watched, though, Bryan, they kind of struggled in kind of that it was a game that was scrambled together at the last minute just because of cancellations already due to COVID, unfortunately. And
Yeah.
Lucas Lovejoy, they're one of the favorites down in 5A Division II, and that was one, man. We saw, unfortunately, a pretty serious injury. What can you say about the Vikings and what's going on there?
Yeah, it was a really tough week for them. I mentioned it in my story, the pregame hurdles that they had to go through, the changing the game, changing location. I mean, they were going to go down the street to Waller. It was not going to be a bad first week, and then it changed to Lucas Lovejoy, who was like probably going to make a state run this year, and then you lose your head coach a couple of days before the game, and due to COVID, so it was just a lot of stuff happening before the game even started, and then when the game did start, I mean, the trouble started piling up from there. The Vikings couldn't get anything going in the beginning, in the first half, and then Malcolm Gooden finally got the chance to throw a little bit, see that arm that we saw last year, and it kind of he got hurt on, I believe it was the third play that he had threw. the ball, and he ended up getting hurt. And I'll have an update on him a little bit later, so stay tuned for that. But yeah, it just kind of all piled up for them. I think Gooden didn't get a chance to show what he could do. Obviously, you know, it was a lot of running, which they do to establish the passing game, obviously, but you know, the run game just wasn't working for them, and Lucas Lovejoy really took advantage of that, and you know, they were stopping them left and right, and then of course they would go and score. So it was just a hard week one for them. You know, Brett Page, the interim head coach, you know, was just saying after the game, we just have to kind of put this out of our mind and keep going. I mean, it's week one, preseason, obviously doesn't matter as much for the record, but still you don't want to lose, and losing that way especially. So it's really just about them getting back and you know, really putting week one behind them.
For sure. You know, I guess the question is now with Gooden out kind of indefinitely, we'll have an update on him hopefully in the coming days. But, you know, where do you think Bryan's going to turn to at quarterback, and how tough is it to lose a guy like that? I mean, he's probably one of their best players on the team.
Yeah, it was really tough. You know, nobody really saw the play where he actually got hurt. We were all looking, he threw a 38-yard pass to, now I can't remember, Tate, I think it was. So, you know, he threw that long pass. It was the longest pass that they threw all night. Everybody was looking at Tate catch it. Nobody was really paying attention to Gooden, and you know, he was on the floor after that play. And it was a late hit. Lovejoy got called for a late hit on Gooden, and he stayed down. They brought the stretcher out. He put up a thumbs up. So, but yeah, I think so. Carson Dillard, I can't remember right now if he's a junior or senior, but he came in as a backup quarterback. I believe he came from Gonzaga. He is new to Bryan, I do know that. But yeah, he came in. He didn't do bad. I think under the circumstances, he actually did pretty well. He threw for 59 yards. He did have an interception, but you know, I think Lovejoy is just such a strong team that they were able to just capitalize on any little mistake that Bryan made. So you know, it wouldn't be fair for me to say that he did bad or that he was a bad backup or anything like that, because I think we didn't really get to see him. You know, we definitely didn't get to see him start the game. We didn't get to see him against, you know, I think at that point Lovejoy was already up by so much that it wasn't really fair. But I think for his first time being in there, he did well under the circumstances, and I think it'll be exciting to. I'm assuming that they're going to start him this week against College Park, and so it'll be interesting to see how he starts, how he, you know, deals with the receivers and stuff like that. Because obviously, you know, before the season started, we were talking about Gooden and how excited we were to see him again. He's the dual threat quarterback, great guy for them. You know, it's a tough loss for sure, but you know, it'll be really interesting to see what Dillard does when he gets that first start. And I think Bryan's gonna just have to kind of roll with the punches here.
For sure. A&M Consolidated, they rolled past Waco University 68-7. That was the game that I got to watch Friday night. You know, one of the big questions for the Tigers coming in this season was how things at quarterback would shake out. Brody Daniel won that starting job in fall camp, and he certainly provided some answers. He had that 7-touchdown performance. You know, Keyshawn Thomas and Wesley Greaves, I mean, they were some really reliable targets. You know, he hit Thomas out of the backfield a couple of times on some screens. You know, Wesley, a couple of backside posts, the same play, wide open, over the top for some touchdowns, you know. And then at the same time, you know, Brody Daniel showing a little bit of his athleticism, moving over from receiver. I mean, there was a moment he scrambled out left looking like Johnny Manziel out there. So, you know, take it with a little grain of salt maybe. Waco University, not that great of a team. But, you know, you definitely like to see what you saw from Consol, you know, especially after they didn't do too hot at State 7-on-7, where they normally have a pretty good showing. on defense. I thought their front seven was as advertised. Jaden Thomas really hyped it up of, hey, this is going to be the strength of our defense. That linebacking core is really solid with, Tyndall McNamara, Cole Eckhart, Brock Sladen. And then on the D line, Thomas, he's the veteran. They got some new guys in there, but you see the size and you see the learning curve taking off a little faster maybe than expected. Unfortunately, they had a starter get hurt late in the game, likely won't be available this week. But great start for Consol, and they jumped into the top 10 at 5A Division II this week. So they're getting noticed for that kind of outing. So, Travis was at the Rudder game, and Rudder moved past Bastrop pretty good. Just looking for what Travis wrote and what Coach Izar had to say. It seemed like defense was kind of the story for the Rangers, only holding Bastrop to only 162 yards of offense and only 30 on the ground. So that's a pretty impressive start for the Rangers. And then, we knew what they could do on offense a little bit. Obviously, bringing EJ Izar back, they have the new receivers, but Coach Izar pretty optimistic about where they stand. Guys like MJ Hurd, he got in on some of the action. Montavian Reed, pretty solid in the backfield. So, if you're Rudder, you probably like what you see out there, and that's a good start for them because they're going to have a pretty solid test this week.
I think so. And, we've talked in years past about how, their offense has always been kind of on the straight and narrow. We don't really have to worry about them in the sense, obviously, when EJ had Keith Ron Lee, we didn't really, the only thing we talked about is pretty much that duo. But we've never really worried about offense so much as we have defense. And I think, especially since this is the year that they really are pushing that playoff spot, they really want it. And I think defense has been the missing piece in the past couple of years since Izar has been there. And I think, obviously it's just a preseason game, and it was a pretty large margin. They obviously beat Bastrop last year too by a big margin, but it's really good to see, like you said, see the defense really step up and got, Rudder had 3 unanswered touchdowns against Bastrop. So I think that's, it's a lot of confidence to give to that team, who's really they have playoffs on their mind. So.
For sure. Well, down at the private school level, I got a chance to watch Allen's season opener against BB Chia on Thursday night. Allen coming away with the win late into the night. Lightning delayed that one for quite a while. Allen coming off the state championship game appearance last year, a lot of key guys graduated from that team. You can see them kind of dealing with a little bit of the growing pains, but they had their moments, they had their flashes for a team that's still trying to form itself and maybe find a little bit of identity. I really liked what I saw from Jahu Lee and Aiden Field. Ethan Lucas back at quarterback, he was pretty solid. Luke Meadows was pretty good on both sides of the ball. But, BB Chia, they gave him a really good fight. Allen is still a very talented team and probably going to be a contender down there in that top 6-man level. But, I was pretty impressed with how BB Chia hung with them. Owen Davis is definitely for sure their guy.
Yeah.
But they've got a couple other guys out there that can make some plays too. So, you like what you see from Allen and maybe a little more optimistic about BB Chia too. Abigail, what's one area game that caught your attention last week?
So I think Burton really caught my attention. I think after our media day, just talking with Coach Hody, I got really excited about Burton. I think they're going to do well this season. We don't talk too much about them. But I think, especially after last season, they go, 4-7 overall. I think they're going to have a really good year this year. And I think that was going to start with this game against Holland. Last year they lost, I can't remember the final score, but they lost to Holland last year, kind of started the chain reaction of them having trouble. They weren't sure who their starting quarterback was. They just had a lot of young guys that weren't used to Friday Night Lights, and it just kind of rolled on from there. And I think really getting this win this early was probably pretty important to the Panthers. I would think that this game was one of the ones that they really wanted to redeem themselves. Holland was projected to win this by 8, I believe. So I think Burton won 32-6. I think they really wanted to show what they have, the talent that they have, and what they could do. They showed some promise in the run game, with Logan Kapansky and Tyrone Gilman, and that was really nice to see. I know they do have more of a starting quarterback this year, but it was really nice to see the run game come in. Defense-wise, we know the Hines brothers kind of lead the way there. Burton had 3 fumbles that ended up being 3 touchdowns, which is exactly what you want to see from your defense, especially this early on against a good team like Holland. And then, Waylon Hines had 9 tackles, and then you get a trio of guys who have 6 each. I mean, I think it was a great game all around for them. They're already showing how much they've improved from last year, just with this single game. So that game really caught my attention. But what about you, Alex? What did you see this week?
Yeah, the one that caught my attention was Snook taking down 4A Houston Cashmere 43-18, excuse me. The Garrett gang, that's what I'm gonna call them. They took care of business. 4 rushing touchdowns for sophomore Garrett Heivell and Coach Conway's debut with the Blue Jays. We know what they've got in quarterback Garrett Laro, but seeing a sophomore kind of emerge like that's big. And anytime a 2A school can beat a 4A school, that's impressive. When we talked with Step for our season preview, he kind of noted Snook was a team that he had his eye on in the Brazos Valley, and rightfully so. I mean, Coach Patterson did some great things, and I think Coach Conway came into a pretty good situation and is just picking up where they left off, and it seems like it's going to be a good transition, but Snook's going to have a tough test this week. They're on the road against Thorndale. That's always a pretty good, scrappy team. So I'm curious to see how the Blue Jays carry over some of that week 1 success into this week as they go on the road for a pretty tough game. Well, let's move along. Let's look at week 2. Good segue there. Looking ahead to week 2, Abigail. Let's start with Bryan. Okay, they're going to be playing College Park. That game's at home, correct?
Yeah.
Yes, they're playing at Merrill Green Stadium Friday night. Whew, we got a lot of teams to remember. It's easy to remember though where Bryan's playing, because if Rudder's not at home, Bryan is probably at home.
There you go.
And Rudder, we'll get to Rudder here in a minute. They're going to be making a little hike. What do you think's gonna be the most important thing for Bryan to kind of get their bearings back with a new quarterback, maybe Coach Rogers back on the sidelines in a game against a team from a pretty talent-rich area?
Yeah. Well, I talked to Rogers earlier today. He said it's to be determined on whether he plays or whether he just not going to play, whether he's there on Friday. Oh my goodness, there's so much.
I would love to see Coach Rogers jot out there and see what he can do at the age of, I can't remember how old he is. I think he's over 70.
Yeah, well, yeah. So he's not playing. He's not playing. He's not their starting quarterback or anything. But anyway. It's to be determined if he's even going to be on field for Friday's game. But I think either way, I think the same things are still the same. We're going to need to see their special teams and their defense step up. We've talked a lot about their defense this year of being really strong. That's where they have the most depth. They have the most guys who can come in and out and be fine. We're going to really need to see them step up a little bit sooner this week. Gosh, all my words are mixed up. But They did come back a little bit. They held Lovejoy to just 3 points in the second half. Oh, yeah, 7 maybe. I don't know. Gosh, I can't remember now. But anyway, they're going to need them to do that in the first half. They're going to need them to step up and stuff. We saw Nick Carraway. He got a few good tackles in there towards the end of that game, but really going to need him and all the other guys to really step up there. Special teams, getting them better field position and not starting so far back in their territory. So they're 7-point favorites, I believe, over College Park. But College Park is bringing a lot of heat too. So I think it's going to be a really good match to see them, how they come back from that week 1 game, how they match with the diversity of having, College Park has a senior quarterback at the helm. They'll have probably Dillard, who's coming in and maybe didn't even expect to play this year at quarterback specifically after a good injury. But, College Park, they're the defending district champs. They have a senior quarterback in Cody Maldacta, I think his last name is. And then they have a Baylor commit wide receiver in Ty Buckman. So, it's going to be a big test for Bryan. I think luckily they'll be at home. They'll be surrounded by all their fans and in Merrill Green, and hopefully that'll give them some confidence. And obviously they're trying to prove themselves after that week 1 game against Lovejoy. But it's really just going to take them getting faster, getting their special teams and defense just getting started earlier. And I think, like I said earlier, we'll be able to see what Dillard's capable of as far as the offense goes.
A&M Consolidated, they're big favorites again over a 6A school. This time they're facing Aldine MacArthur. What I'm curious to see is if they can put together another dominant performance. Last week was certainly impressive out of the gates. I'm curious to see what the Tigers have to follow with. Penalties is something I want to see them clean up this week. There were a lot of flags in that game last week. I think 16. I'm curious if those guys had to run a little bit because of all the yellow on the field. But let's see how Brody Daniel can follow up last week's big performance. Keyshawn Thomas, he's taken over the starting running back role. He didn't get a lot of carries last week. It was actually Dre Minor, the backup who transferred from Rudder a couple years ago, that got the bulk of the carries there in the second half because Consol was finding so much success throwing the ball.
Yeah.
So, is there maybe a little bit more of a balanced approach this week? Maybe they keep hitting it over the top, and that's just where the Tigers are going to go. Coming into the season, I thought maybe the running game would be a little more heavy for Consol, considering what you have with Keyshawn Thomas and considering Brody Daniel's got the athleticism and the speed to run the ball from that quarterback spot. But hey, if you can throw it over the top and get 40 yards a play, why not? So that's really what I'm wanting to see from Consol. On the flip side of town, College Station, a home opener against Fort Bend Bush, another 6A team out of the Houston area. Abigail, what do you think the Cougars need to see from their team this week?
Yeah, I think it's similar to Consol. I mean, I think the thing that they're looking at most is probably the offensive penalties. They really racked up on last Thursday. They had 7 for 85 yards. It's not something we're used to seeing from the Cougars, but it's really been a topic of discussion with Steve Huff this season. I mean, he talked about it during their scrimmage with Temple, and then he talked about it right before they played Hutto this week. And we talked about it again on Thursday, but I think that's going to be a really big focus for them, is just limiting those. They have a great offense. I think it's just like little simple mistakes that they're making, and especially it's early on in the season. We're getting back in the hang of being in a game and, playing 4 quarters. But I think that's probably going to be something that they're going to want to see kind of go away after this week 2 game. They're big favorites against Fort Bush. I expect it to be similar to the Hutto game a little bit as far as score wise. And I think they're just going to need to keep it going. But I think, you mentioned Consol, maybe we thought that the run game would be more dominant than the passing game, and it's kind of switched. And I think we definitely saw a lot of running from College Station that I didn't expect. Not that they don't have great backs, but I think, they have so many targets for Jet at the receiver position that I just figure that he would be throwing more. But when the run game's working, why change it at that point? You got, Traylon Sewell, who's able to do both. He's able to catch and run. And then Marquise Collins is always a great guy to see on the floor for you. So, and then Nate Palmer came in at the end, and by that time College Station was up by a lot, so he got some good reps in the second half. So I think really they just need doing what they're doing on both sides of the ball, but I think penalties is definitely going to be a big piece to what they're trying to fix kind of before this before the district starts or before the season really gets going.
Rudder Rangers, this is going to be a big test for them. Playing El Paso Americas out in Kerrville. The game has gotten moved up to 6 p.m. So that'll be good for the folks driving home late at night. Good exposure playing an El Paso team, getting out there, playing a team you may or may not have ever heard of. I mean, you probably have heard of El Paso, but maybe not America's High School in particular. Yeah. I think for the Rangers, a team that's aspiring to finally make the playoffs for the first time, this is going to be a good experience for them. It's a game against a pretty even opponent that you don't really know a lot about. It's at a neutral site. It's at a big stadium. So you kind of, I don't know how many fans are going to be there. It's a pretty far drive both ways. But as far as situation goes, this is a pretty good simulation of some sort of playoff game early in the season. And, I think Rudder's a 4-point favorite according to the Harris ratings this week. So you got to think that this will be a game that, Coach Izar's hoping will pay off come November for Rudder. We'll see what the Rangers can do. Just looking at El Paso Americas, they lost last week to Midland Christian on the road, who had a pretty Midland Christian we saw at State 7-on-7, pretty impressive team down at the private school ranks. So, I mean, even though you lose by 5 touchdowns, it's no slouch of a team.
And I think, from what I've gathered, El Paso Americas, they have their strength is their defense. And so I know it doesn't look like that by that score, obviously, but like we said, Midland Christian is that, great team. But their strength is their defense. So I think it'll be really interesting to see. Obviously, last week, Rudder's offense got off to a pretty good start as far as week 1 goes. And it'll be interesting to see how they go against a team that's known for their defense. And they're coming off a losing season, El Paso Americas. So I think they're ready to get going. And I think especially after losing week 1, to such a great team like Midland Christian, I think they'll be ready to go. But Alex, like you said, it'll be interesting to see how they do with this big test on the road, almost 3 hours away.
Well, Abigail, what's one area game that you've got your eye on this week?
Well, we had a pretty big one in Franklin and Hearn. We've talked, these are 2 area teams that we probably talk about as much as we talk about the local teams. Franklin obviously coming off that state title or state runner-up last year, and Hearn coming back with a lot of great guys. These are 2 teams that return just a buttload of people, and we saw them. They were able to play 7-on-7 pretty well and things like that. But I think it'll be exciting to see Franklin's offense go against Hearn's defense. I mean, I think whoever goes to that game is going to be just a great watch. You got Stephen Kraft Mitchell and Anthony Jackson on the other side of, guys like Bryson, Malcolm, and all Marcus Wade. Like it should just be a great game, and I think Franklin obviously I think has the advantage this week, just as far as experience wise, and just they have so many guys that they brought back. It's hard to compete with that, especially this early. We saw that they obviously they beat Lorena in week 1 after. Last season, that was such a heartbreaking loss. They lost by 1 point, I believe, last year to Lorena. So I think they're really on a roll. They're ready to prove themselves. But I think Hearn is really going to give them, push them a little bit, at least pretty early on this season. So that'll be exciting to see. Hearn, obviously, their offense, we have, quarterback Keyshawn Langham and Jabari Dunn, which is just a great duo you want to have on your team. And so, yeah, I think overall it'll be pretty interesting to see both of them face off against each other.
Yeah, I definitely think that game, if Hearn is going to have a chance to win that game, they are going to have to be strong on the defensive line. And you got to feel good what you've got with Anthony Jackson, Stephen Kraft Mitchell, but they're going to have to play some of the game of their lives. This Franklin offense is the real deal. And I think on offense for Hearn, knowing what Jabari Dunn brings to the table, Hearn's probably going to have a couple of other guys step up in a big way, because Franklin,
Sure.
I mean, Franklin's defense is as salty as its offense. And I mean, it's pretty easy to mark down one guy when you've got defensive backs like Malcolm Murphy and Bryson Washington and Marcus Wade. So, I think Franklin's going to win that game. But I'm curious to see if Hearn can be pretty competitive against what's going to be a state title contender at the 3A level.
Yeah, it'll be a big test, I think, for them.
I think both teams will benefit from this game as they move forward, for sure. The game I've got my eye on is Summerville at Anderson-Shiro. It's our other game this week that features 2 area teams. Summerville, that Johnny Legg Vercobe Woodbury connection got going last week.
They really did.
Woodbury, he made our honorable mention player of the week notes. 5 catches for 100 yards and 4 touchdowns. I mean, that's pretty efficient. You think about it. So Anderson-Shiro, they lost last week by a couple scores, but they're always pretty good at home. And they beat Somerville pretty well last year. Maybe this time around, the matchup's going to be a little more even. But Anderson's a tough place to go and win a game at. But, for Somerville, if they win this game, I mean, that can be a big boost for them. Just pulling up Somerville from last year, Oh,
I think so. I picked Somerville to win this week, just because I think that they could do it. I think last season they had a really hard time getting going, and they had a lot of guys who maybe didn't have a lot of experience. They didn't quite know where people were going to go and what positions that they were going to fill. And I think this year they're really solid. I think they know exactly who they are and what they can do. And we saw that obviously with Johnny Legg and Vercobe Woodbury last week. And I think that they can do that again. I think they're just really confident this year, more so ever than they were last year. And like you said, Anderson obviously has a great squad coming in. They didn't return a lot of starters, so they're also trying to fill some holes there. But they're great at home, and they have that win behind them from last year. So, it'll be interesting to see those 2 go at it. But I have Somerville, so maybe they'll surprise everybody and make me look really smart.
There you go. Well, of note, unfortunately, COVID-19 already affecting some of our area teams. Brazos Christian's game against San Antonio Holy Cross been canceled. The Eagles looking to get back on the field next week against Corpus Christi John Paul II, as Coach Hoffmeyer kindly sent to us yesterday. Thanks, Coach. And Bremond, their game against Axtell has been moved up a day Hopefully they'll still get to play. Axtell, as a high school, dealing with quite a few active cases. They're going to close down school Friday through Tuesday, I believe, trying to stop the spread of the virus. So fingers crossed that they're still able to play that game, and hope folks in Axtell can get healthy and back to school soon. And then this is a big one, and I can't. We might be bearing the lead here a little bit, but
Hey, it's okay.
Lexington's Jared Kerr, he is out with an undisclosed injury for an undetermined amount of time. Guy that's committed to Texas A&M to play safety. We didn't know that he wasn't playing last week, and Friday night, just checking the scores, you see Lexington lose to West, a team they beat last year, 48-7. I mean, that catches your eye.
Yeah.
So, that is obviously a tough hit to the Eagles team. So we're hoping that Jared gets healthy soon. But that's something that we'll keep an eye on and be following in the weeks to come.
Yeah, I think we talked about it maybe in the first podcast about how Lexington really this year is going to have to learn how to play with more than just Kerr. That was before, obviously, we knew that he was hurt or injured of any kind, but I think it still stands, obviously, now, of them really having to find their guys that are going to step up and take Kerr's spot, because obviously we know that he's their guy. He does everything for them. We always talk about him. We always hear his name when we're talking about Lexington. So this is the time that they're really going to have to find that person and get in that groove if they want to get far this season. But I think I do have one more injury update, which we're also burying, but Malcolm Gooden. So he fractured his left leg. That was an injury on Friday when he got hit, that late hit. His mom did tell me that he is out for the season. They're going to the doctor tomorrow. They're not sure if he needs to just wear a brace and it needs to heal, or if it's actually further along where he needs to have surgery. They're going there tomorrow to figure that out. But she did say that he will be on the sidelines on Friday at Merrill Green, cheering on his team, and he'll continue to do that throughout the season. But she says he's doing good, and that's always really good to hear. I know that I didn't see the hit personally because I wasn't looking that way, but it had to be pretty tough for him to go down like that. And he's a junior, luckily, so he'll have another year at Bryan, but always tough to see in week one. And so good to hear that he's at least doing well and they're trying to figure it out.
For sure. Well, thanks again, everyone, for tuning in to another episode of the Brazos Sports PrepsCast. Follow us on Twitter at Brazos Sports. Send us your scores, please. We'd love to retweet them and be able to keep up with your teams and get to discuss things on this podcast around the area. So be sure to check out theeagle.com for all of our high school football coverage. And we'll see you next week. District play starting next week for a team or two. So for Abigail Ochoa, I'm Alex Miller. We'll see you next time on the Brazos Sports PrepsCast.